Hi there, it's Sarah here. I'm going to make a video today of my walkthrough process of my little Pixie Child artwork. I'm using a stencil from my Let's Face It range, and it's from the children's set. I started off with some spray inks and just created a background. But I wanted to show you the process I use for actually painting faces. I always thought actually I couldn't paint people or faces because as an artist I used to paint animals, and people used to ask me all the time, you know, can you do a painting of my daughter or whatever? And I used to say, oh no, I can't paint people, I can only paint animals. But as anything, I decided to have a go, and I created the stencil range, and it's just practice. It really is. I think anybody can do it. It's just getting an idea of how you layer up the colours for the skin tones, etc., and just play, you know, and have a go. Anybody can do it, especially with the stencil, because it gives you an idea. It gives you a starting point, and if you can't draw, then you've instantly got the outline of the face, which you can keep putting over the top of your paint. If you mask it out with your base colours, it doesn't matter, because you pop your stencil back over the top and you can get your features and everything back. So they really are so helpful, the face stencils. But anyway, I just wanted to make this video to give you an idea of how I go about making a face, and I hope you enjoy it. Although I like to use watercolours and inks, for the actual face I prefer to use acrylics. They're a lot more forgiving, and watercolour is I personally find it very difficult. Although I love using it for skin, I like to build up layers, and I prefer acrylics because that's what I'm used to. So even though I'm working on watercolour paper, I'm still going to use acrylics for the face. So I put a layer of gesso just on the area that I'm going to use acrylics on, which will help me the acrylics set and look better. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just laying on some gesso, some white gesso. Obviously I've used inks here, so the colour's running a bit, but it doesn't matter underneath, because especially as the fairy's going to have a green tone to her face anyway, it really doesn't matter. And by the time I've finished all the layers that I will build up on the skin, you won't see the colour underneath. So don't panic if you start to, everything starts running and making a mess. It doesn't really matter, at this stage. You just want to get a bit of a layer of gesso down, just to give you a key. Here what I'm doing is just using water on the ink that I've already laid down, just to fill in the hair detail, spreading the colour underneath to give me a background colour on the hair. Okay, I'm going to start off by using Naples Yellow acrylic paint. This, I like Naples Yellow, it's a really nice base for your flesh colour. So I'm just going to literally just go right over all the highlighted areas of the face. And well, I'm just going to fill the whole face in really with the Naples Yellow over the top of the gesso. Some shadows on the hair just to give it some depth with the Neocolor 2 watercolor crayons. These are really easy, simple to use. They're just watercolors in a crayon form, but it means you can get a bit more creative and use them quite easily, just drawing with them and then add your water afterwards. But I find them great for highlighting or defining areas rather than using a dark colour, either acrylic or pen. These are really good for defining areas. that I'd created when I used the bubble stencil. So I decided to use this stencil that has leaves and vines on it, just to disguise that edge that I managed to make unavoidably. So I'm just stenciling some acrylic paint through the vine leaves just to give me some extra dimension, and as I say, to hide. You can always fix things that you do and you think, oh, I don't like that, you know. That's the great thing about mixed media, you just keep adding things to it, you know, and you can always get by and overcome most things. And at the end of the day, you're using a stencil, so you can start again, you know, if you really think that it's not going to work at all. As I said at the beginning, everything is just practice, just trying things out. Some things work and some things don't, but at the minute I just want to disguise that stencil mark that I'd made, which I wasn't really happy with. Some Neocolor crayon just to put some highlight in the hair now. burnt umber just to put some shadows into the face. Now when you see this, you're going to think, oh no, you're ruining it, but don't forget that the skin is all about layering up, so you can be quite harsh. You can put some strong paint down, because we're going to be going over it again and again and again, so anything you put down at this stage is going to be covered up. So, but I want it there in underneath to give the depth to the face, to make it look 3D. So wherever I'm thinking there's going to be shadow, I'm putting in the burnt umber. A great thing to do if you're new to painting faces is find a photograph in a magazine where the light source is coming from, so you know where the shadows are on a face. It doesn't have to be anything like, it can be a male face, it doesn't really matter, as long as you stick to where the shadows are. It gives you a good indication. So on my painting, the shadows, the sun or the light is coming in from the left hand side, so the shadows are all going to be on the right. So there's the colours I tend to use for faces, for Caucasian skin, is the Naples yellow that I used originally, and the burnt umber raw sienna. I tend for shadows as well, even in this I did want a green tone because it's a pixie, but Viridian, for a shadow I like to use that colour, or a very dark blue, rather than, never use black in a painting at all if you can avoid it. But so dark browns, greens, blues, nice dark colours, and you sort of think, oh, green, but when you've actually finished, you don't even notice the fact it's green. It just looks like a shadow, because no skin is, pink. When you look at it, it's got veins, so there's blue tones in there, red tones. There's lots of different colours in your skin, so just lay all the colours down and they'll all be there in the background showing through. So don't worry that it sort of looks ugly, because there are points in a painting quite often where you think, oh, I think I've gone a bit far. But especially with acrylic, we've got to remember you're putting layers down, so anything that you put down you can cover over, but it's still there in the background to give depth to the 3D appearance. So it can get quite ugly sometimes, but don't worry about it. So I've laid down the where I want the shadows, and now I'm going in with the Naples yellow again over the top, so that I'm putting back in the highlights. So there's always highlights under the eyes, down the nose, on the tip of the nose, on the chin, anywhere that stands out, proud, is where it's going to catch the light. upon layers on top of each other of the paint, you'll notice that it starts to go a bit funny. So what you need to do is dry it off and use, I used a matte artist medium, and just on the face itself where you're using the acrylics, and what this does is it seals what you've done, and then you can then go ahead and start adding more, because sometimes if you add too much paint without sealing it, it'll turn muddy and you'll lose your definition and the paint will start pilling up. So what I tend to do is I do a couple of layers, and then you'll be able to tell because the paint does start to go a bit funny, and then I'll seal it and dry it off, and then everything you've done then is then preserved, and you can go ahead and put more layers over the top. This is a really good, this is the great thing about acrylics. You can keep sealing and then, you know, going over it and over it, and you won't lose the detail. That's why I like to, you know, use acrylics for the face. It's very, very forgiving. Sorry, I didn't realise that my recording had stopped. So on the next frame you'll see that I've added some black alcohol marker just to do her irises and her pupils rather, and just a few little really dark details. Here I'm using green alcohol markers just to add detail into her eyes. You can use paint, but on this instance I decided to use the markers. You get a bit more control with a nice fine nib. So I'm just adding you know, extra detail into the eyes themselves. freckles with the alcohol markers, they really stood out a bit too much. So I'm just going over the area with the Naples yellow again, just to mute them down a bit. And I'll just keep adding paint on top until I get to the point where they just show through nicely. And you think, oh, I've put too much on now, I've ruined all the nice skin colour, but just keep going back over it and going back over it with the same colours, and you're just building up depth every time you do that. I always use a white pen touch pen to do the highlights in the eyes. I think it's fabulous, especially for mixed media, because it goes over so many different types of paints, and a lot of pens just dry out, but I've had such good results with this one. I wouldn't use anything else now. Any highlights on any type of surface, I've managed to find this pen's brilliant, so I tend to use this more than anything. I'm just doing a few finishing touches with a dark grey alcohol marker, just to define a few areas which I feel need a bit more shadow. Don't forget, when you're painting lips, the top lip is always a lot darker than the bottom lip, because the bottom lip catches the light more because it sticks out. I hope you've enjoyed watching this paint through. I couldn't think what to call it then. This is how I do it, but obviously, you know, lots of people do things a different way. I'm a self-taught artist, so techniques I sort of make up as I go along. But you know, I'm really happy with this little one, and using the stencil just made it so much easier to keep the proportion, which is very difficult, you know, when you're painting faces, to get the proportions right. So anyway, hopefully there'll be more videos from me soon, and have fun creating. See you soon.